to join you today. So I'm going to take the perspective of, as an investor, how we looked at this and how Qiming would look at it, and more importantly, how I would look at this. And the first thing to say is that the rise of an app like TikTok was inevitable. And when you look at the largest internet on the planet, which is within China, and you look at the amount of money that's been invested in the venture capital market there over the last 20 years, which would total hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars. You look at the scale of the market, you look at the engineering talent, generally that would be enough to create a great deal of innovation and new forms of communication and messaging. China also has the added benefit of being a protected home market in which to launch a large number of services and perfect things. And I think we're just starting to see the Chinese companies where their own domestic market's not enough and they want to be global players. And so, again, I think this is something that it was inevitable. The fact that it's TikTok may be unfortunate for them. Alibaba has tried to be successful in the U.S. with modest results. Tencent really doesn't have a huge amount of revenue coming from the United States outside of gaming. So talking about how TikTok came to be in this position, so first of all, you look at the ownership structure. So TikTok was formed out of the acquisition by ByteDance of a company called Musical.ly. And Musical.ly was this app that initially was getting relatively modest traction, good but modest traction in the United States for young adults, adolescents to lip sync to videos. And Musical.ly had a series of investors. Qiming was one of those investors. And as part of a round of financing, ByteDance made the Musical.ly acquisition. And what changed was the fact that the technology capability within ByteDance that they had perfected with their Douyin application in China, which is very similar to TikTok, but focused on the Chinese market. They simply wound up with better algorithms in terms of being able to focus and create more stickiness or addictiveness, if you will, of those applications. And an example of a historical example of this in terms of something that I experienced a long time ago was Google. So Yahoo had a search engine, Alta Vista had a search engine. Back in the late 90s, there were a number of players. And I remember when we were looking at an investment in Google, and the Yahoo folks' response was, you don't really need to do that. We have everything they have. Clearly, that was not the case. And it was simply because people were not privy to exactly what was driving the Google search engine and the power of those sets of algorithms. 20 years later, we have TikTok. So I actually think there's quite an interesting comparison between the two in terms of things that you look at. You would think that all the competitors are the same, but they're clearly not. Melissa talked about what we're looking at for the competitive landscape. Facebook is ferociously trying to ban TikTok. And the reason they're doing that is they have not yet been able to figure out how to compete with them. And so it's interesting. You don't read much about that, but there's a huge lobbying effort and a lot of money being spent by Facebook to try to ban TikTok. And I think a lot of it's being couched under U.S., what's good for the U.S., et cetera. But it's clearly good for Facebook if TikTok is banned in the United States. I don't think Facebook's a huge fan of Microsoft or Twitter buying TikTok, especially if the algorithmic capabilities and everything come with it. I think that would create a perhaps even more fierce competitor than they would have just with TikTok alone in the U.S. There's nothing in TikTok's ownership structure to cause pause or concerns. Most of the investors in ByteDance and TikTok to this point are international funds with primarily U.S. LPs. Sequoia Capital, Hillhouse, SIG, which is the Susquehanna Group out of Philadelphia. Those are the primary, and SoftBank, those are the primary investors. And the vast majority of the cash for those investors has come from U.S. endowments, foundations, and pensions. So when you look at the ownership structure in the cap table for ByteDance, and TikTok is simply a subsidiary of ByteDance, you don't really see any Chinese government entities. And that's very similar to when Alibaba in the same stage, Tencent in the same stage, Baidu, they were all funded with overseas money. There was virtually no Chinese money in the cap tables of those companies prior to their public offering. So if you look at the standpoint of why are we going after this, there's really not an overriding ownership structure, we'd say this goes back directly to Beijing. The target audience group has always been sensitive. So looking back over history of media, things that were targeting kids, and kids going up, including people up, young adults, 15, 16, 18 years old, that has always been an extremely sensitive area. And it's the first time that it's a foreign company that is coming into the U.S. market and actually having that success. You could argue, well, the Sony Walkman, but there was really no social element to that. It was simply a machine to play music. This is something completely different. And I think that the fact that it's coming at this time with the U.S.-China relations in more of a fraught position certainly plays into that. But they have really cracked the code on some underlying technology, and we have to respect and accept that. I still come back to the fact this is just the first of a wave of Chinese firms that are not going to be satisfied with leading only in their domestic market. They have huge scale. Historically in technology, a U.S. firm had such an advantage because if you were the largest firm in the United States, inevitably when you went overseas, you went overseas as the largest firm in the world. That is no longer the case. And I think that much as we have the discussion around the U.S. being the world's largest economy, China, quote, overtaking, it's really, to me, it's a false comparative. They have 4 times as many people. You would hope that economy would be healthy and would grow and probably be larger than the U.S. But I think this is an example where it's come up very quickly and it's taken a number of people by surprise. And so people are uncomfortable with this. And I think we should become more straightforward and honest about dealing with this.